Hello, I'm Anita Bennett, and this is LA Currents. Many Black Americans consider June 19th or Juneteenth to be Independence Day. That's the day that the last enslaved people in this country were freed, but the celebration was bittersweet because they learned about their freedom over 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation was signed. Joining us to talk about Juneteenth in the city of Los Angeles are City Councilman Price, Marquise Harris-Dawson, and Mark Ridley-Thomas. Thank you so much for being here.
Delighted to be here.
Yeah. So Juneteenth seems to be growing in popularity in the city of Los Angeles. Why do you think that is?
The unrest related to social justice and equity has permeated down, and certainly there's a greater awareness now of Juneteenth, greater appreciation of its historical significance, and a great appreciation for the need to celebrate it.
I think what you see over time is the story of Black people in this city more and more becoming central to the overall narrative about what Los Angeles and Southern California is. The Black community helped build this community. It helped make it the creative capital of the world, and so our story is one that's on the front page.
Given the fact that Los Angeles is one of the largest population centers for African Americans, it is very difficult to imagine that there wouldn't be celebrations, and many of them to pay attention to and to pay homage to the high points and the low points of the African American sojourn in the United States of America. That's what it's about, I think.
And how do you communicate the importance of the day, Councilman Price?
I'm happy to report that activities that are going to be taking place in Leimert Park really symbolic of the Black community throughout Southern California, and appreciate the moment in time that we're in and the significance of it moving forward.
And I would go out on a limb and say it's not just about celebrating, but also raising awareness, correct?
Telling that story is important throughout our history, but especially now, because it's always important to have reminders of where we can go. We celebrate, but effectively people stayed in slavery 2 years after the time slavery had ended, after America had fought its bloodiest war, where it lost more people than it's ever lost in any war. To end slavery, people stayed in slavery for 2 years more because the message didn't make it there. Part of the lore is that the messenger that was sent by the federal government to Texas got killed on the way. Well, that just happened January 6th. Well, we were trying to certify an election, and so I think it's important to keep these stories front and center as a reminder for how far we can fall if we're not vigilant.
You mentioned the protests over the summer, and they raised so much awareness about redlining, Black people being prevented from obtaining generational wealth. We just had the anniversary of the Tulsa Race Massacre. So, Juneteenth, is it going to become even more conscious now, do you think?
Well, I think it's up to us to push it to the fore. I mean, here in Southern California, we have Bruce's Beach. I mean, for all the talk about Tulsa, we have it right here in our own backyard. And there's more. Make no mistake about it. People have been pushing for generations and will continue to push.
For those who don't know, a Black family who lived in the Manhattan Beach area, they owned property, and 100 years ago that property was seized simply because they're Black. What is happening with that?
The idea is that folks should be made whole. Like, it's not actually very complicated. Folks should be made whole and nothing short of that.
It's the most forceful example of what reparations constitutes. This will not go away, and not only will it not go away, it will bring attention to similar such instances in other parts of the nation. There was government complicity in the denial of their rights.
What I learned is that this family was denied generational wealth, and it's
Exactly.
happened to African Americans
That's right.
in this nation
Absolutely.
for so long. And what that means is that this family would be extremely wealthy right now, but they're not because their property was seized. So are we going to see more instances, hopefully, of people being made whole?
So this is a place where people literally lost their land. But there's also the issue of redlining. All of our families, and I can say this without even knowing the histories, all of our families, when we came here, we had housing on the east side of South LA. That area was redlined. So the property appreciated at a slower rate than everything else around it. So our families walk away when it's time for me to go to college or you to buy a house or whatever. Our families have less to give because of something that was imposed upon their neighborhood. And so we've got a long way to go for people to be truly made whole. I think those are the examples that are more concrete and more objective, but they're much, much broader than that and affect almost anybody who's African American in our society.
This issue of intergenerational wealth is fundamentally important because it has contributed to the impoverishment of communities across the length and breadth of the nation. And I think this is a concrete illustration of that. But the issue of predatory lending and redlining and the like that we have worked on for many years. You mentioned Leimert Park. Leimert Park was defined by restrictive covenants, and it was only after Shelley versus Kramer went to the United States Supreme Court that we had those racially defined areas stricken. Leimert Park. It wasn't until 1957 that the first black family moved in Leimert Park. The legacy of slavery, Juneteenth, the legacy of slavery is real in our very lives, and that's the point that we cannot lose sight of.
And racism, because we just marked what happened in Tulsa.
Tulsa's dramatic. It was a military action by that city and its citizens and that state against those particular people in a particular place over a set number of days. But then there is the pedestrian racism, the everyday racism.
Right.
Every day, you wake up, you go to sleep, it's always there. It's a part of your life, and you live and die with it. That's what we have to get, and that affects us all. There isn't anybody that gets the free pass on that. I might not have lived in Tulsa when the bombs were dropped, but my family lived somewhere, and wherever we lived, redlining was happening, predatory lending was happening, banking discrimination was happening, the denial of insurance was happening. All those things are happening on a day-to-day basis, and we've got a long way to go to correct those things.
And so reparations is not just about, paying for those sins, those wrongs, but really compensating for what happened in the past and how we can move forward with it.
That's right.
And that really is the challenge.
Right.
And so
Right.
this notion of reparations is alive, it's real, and increasingly I think we're going to see levels of government taking specific actions to attempt to address the wrongs that were done.
It may have implications for universal income and a whole range of things that's relevant. And we know that there's leadership on the City Council by Councilman Price on that issue, and both Harris-Dawson and I were pleased to join in helping on that, but that's a big ticket item.
Can you expand a little bit on universal income?
Over 1,000 families will be benefited with $1,000 a month for a year, no strings attached. We've seen experiments in other parts of the country, in other parts of, in fact, in our state, Stockton most recently, demonstrated how these kinds of programs can really be helpful and help turn the tide.
Who are the people benefiting from this, and how do we find them?
So there'll be a lottery, but there's going to be a process by which people will be able to apply to be selected in this program. So we're excited about the prospects of having the largest such experiment here in Los Angeles. It's not a new idea. Martin Luther King talked about that, in the 60s. So as a part, as one answer to that.
Poor People's Campaign. Poor People's March on Washington.
Exactly.
Still having these conversations.
Exactly.
Well, we are out of time. This has been a lively discussion on Juneteenth and race in America and Los Angeles. Thank you so much, Councilman Price, Marquise Harris-Dawson, and Mark Ridley-Thomas. I'm Anita Bennett, and this is LA Currents. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.